Call to order. Welcome to the special board meeting of the Halton Catholic District School Board on Thursday, September 16th, 2021. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and will be posted on the board's YouTube channel. Trustees, be reminded to turn off your microphone and camera on your devices until you are recognized to speak. Please only use the chat box to type hand up. Once you've been recognized, please turn on your microphone and camera. Trustee Tokiwa, would you please lead us in the opening prayer, national anthem, and oath of citizenship?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us engage in meaningful discussion. Allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community, and make decisions not for ourselves, but for the greater good, just as Jesus would. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. Please stand for the singing of O Canada and the oath of citizenship.
Thank you, Trustee Tokiwa. We will move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? Seeing that there are none, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move.
Moved by Trustee Guzzo. Do we have a seconder?
I'll move.
Vice Chair Duarte.
Trustee Guzzo.
I have you as the mover, Trustee Guzzo.
Oh, sorry. I didn't. I must have froze there. My apology.
No
Second it, O'Brien. I'll second it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We'll move to a recorded vote. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa.
I'm opposed.
Vice Chair Duarte. In favor. Trustee Guzzo.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chernota.
In favor.
Trustee Bowie.
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar.
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa.
In favor.
Trustee Murphy's in favor, so motion carries. Item 3, declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest tonight? Seeing that there are none, we'll move on to item 4, the action items. Data collection. The following is a notice of motion from June 1st regular board meeting. Trustee Guzzo, would you like to read the motion? Trustee Guzzo may be having some connection issues today, so I'll start and read the motion. Whereas the Halton Catholic District School Board has been mandated under the Anti-Racism Act of 2017 to collect voluntary identity-based data by January 1st, 2023. Whereas collecting fulsome data about historically underserved communities within the HCDSB, we can better provide opportunity resources through curriculum and PD sessions. Whereas in addition to the curriculum, the data will ensure that the appropriate supports are in place to support staff and students experiencing marginalization.
I'm here.
Okay, if you'd like to jump in, I just finished that marginalization. You left all the big words for me.
I apologize. I had to refresh, so I couldn't hear anything. And
no problem.
So whereas the Human Rights Tribunal states that all schools in Ontario have a legal duty under the Education Act and Ontario's Human Rights Code to ensure a school environment free from harassment and other forms of discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, by not recognizing all groups experiencing marginalization in our data collection, we are upholding systemic discrimination. Be it resolved that Halton Catholic District School Board forms and surveys where identity-based data analysis will allow for more comprehensive and accurate capture of the demographics of our school population, specifically our staff and students, provide the full range of options for gender identity and sexual orientation.
This motion was moved by Trustee Guzzo. Do we have a seconder?
Trustee Agnew?
Seconded by Trustee Agnew. Trustee Guzzo, will you please open discussion?
Yes, thank you. Just give me a second so I can pull it up, because tonight seems to be the night of technical difficulties for me. Sorry, I had to refresh everything, so I've lost my notes. I apologize, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Take your time.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just gonna, sorry, here it is. Okay. Under the Ontario Human Rights Code, students are protected from discrimination and harassment because of gender identity and gender expression in public education. This includes the right of students to have their self-identified gender reflected in official records. The following is an excerpt from the Ontario Human Rights Code's policy on preventing discrimination because of gender identity and gender expression. Under the Ontario Human Rights Code, people are protected from discrimination and harassment because of gender identity and gender expression in employment, housing, facilities, and services, contracts, and membership in unions, trade, or professional association. Discrimination happens when a person experiences negative treatment or impact, intentional or not, because of their gender identity or gender expression. It can be direct and obvious or subtle and hidden, but harmful just the same. It can also happen on a bigger systemic level, such as organizational rules or policies that look neutral but end up excluding trans people. Friends, family, or others who face discrimination because of their association with a trans person are also protected. Everyone has the right to define their own gender identity. Trans people should be recognized and treated as the gender they live in, whether or not they have undergone surgery or their identity documents are up to date. Organizations are liable for any discrimination and harassment that happens. They're also liable for not accommodating a person's needs unless it would cause undue hardship. They must deal with complaints, take steps to prevent problems, and provide a safe, welcoming environment for people. Organizations should learn about the needs of trans people, look for barriers, develop or change policies and procedures, and undertake training. This will help make sure that people and other gender non-conforming individuals are treated with dignity and respect and enjoy equal rights and freedom from discrimination. Importance of data collection. All Ontario school boards are required to collect identity-based data via census as of January 2023 in compliance with Ontario's anti-racism data standards under the Anti-Racism Act 2017. The Minister of Education has stated that it supports the collection, analysis, and use of voluntary student demographic data to promote equitable and inclusive learning environments in Ontario school boards, and that the purpose of collecting this demographic data is that it allows school boards to verify, measure, address, and monitor gaps in systemic disparities affecting students' experience and outcomes. For the Minister of Education, from the Statement of Principles on the Identity-Based Data Collection. A critical step to ensuring equity is to gain a clearer understanding of who our students are and of their school experiences. The purpose of enhancing data collection and performance measurement is to improve the achievement and well-being of all students and, more precisely, identify and address systemic barriers and disparities. A consistent approach to collecting and analyzing voluntary provided identity-based data will help school boards and the minister identify where systemic barriers exist and will help determine how to eliminate discriminatory biases in order to support equity and student achievement and well-being through evidence-informed decision-making. We believe all students have the right to an education free of discrimination and barriers that limit them. As educators, we will work with the Minister of Education toward eliminating barriers to equity of access and outcomes for all students. We know that supporting equity requires evidence-informed decision-making and better understandings of local communities. When we know who our students and their families are, we can better serve them, ensure that their needs are met, and create conditions where all students can be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Guzzo. We'll open up the floor. On the speakers list, we have Trustee Agnew, followed by Trustee Duarte. Trustee Agnew, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to simply say that I'll be supporting this motion. This is not only, as outlined by Trustee Guzzo, the essential importance of supporting this motion so that we can work really, really diligently to eliminate these forms of discrimination, specifically based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. But if you look at how things are moving in the corporate world, in the public sector world, in the private sector world, this is the way that we are moving. We are ensuring that we capture the most accurate information about the people that are responding. We want to know how they identify. We want to recognize that identification. And really, like I said, this is just something that is just becoming more and more prevalent. And it's important that we stay current, and it's important that we stay in line with other organizations out there who are stepping up and bringing up their opportunities to eliminate these forms of discrimination. So as I said, I'll be supporting this, and thank you to Trustee Guzzo for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Vice Chair Duarte, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification here. So we are mandated anyway by the ministry to collect the data by Jan 1st, 2023. Question actually would be, Mr. Chair, to Trustee Guzzo, are we just looking to advance that and get this done faster, or are we? Is it not the same thing that's going to be mandated by the ministry?
Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Duarte. It has, however, if you recall, we did a pilot survey with our schools earlier this year, and I believe the results are in, and maybe I think Dr. Collingmore is on the line, and so is our equity manager. Maybe they can speak to what the results are. When that survey went out, it didn't identify the drop down as I've asked for. It was simply 2 choices or blank, which is not reflective of what the ministry has said by 2023. So my question is why don't we do it now and properly the way we were required to do it by the ministry and not hold off on it? It just sends the wrong message. It definitely does not send the message that we are recognizing and being inclusive of anyone who doesn't identify as male or female. You know, the only other option is other or blank. And we know that when we don't we don't put it out there and acknowledge it, it's as if we're ignoring it and discriminating against it. So that's really where it's at. But maybe they can explain a little bit more what's come back from just that small pilot that went out, and that might help answer, if that's okay, Trustee Dewart.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a follow-up question, Mr. Chair.
Would you like to see if there's any context that Dr. Collmore or CETA can offer, or would you like to ask your next question?
I have a follow-up question after that.
Okay, I'll make a note. Dr. Collmore, do you have any context that you can add?
Sure, good evening, and through you to Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. So as Trustee Guzzo has mentioned, we did do our census pilot just this past year. And as you may recall, the gender identity and sexual orientation questions specifically were only asked of the high school students, of which we had about 45 people respond. All 45 students responded to the gender identity and the sexual orientation questions. As Trustee Guzzo has mentioned, those were both open-ended format, so students had the opportunity to write something in text. For the gender identity question, it was pretty straightforward. It was pretty equal in terms of what people wrote. Most people wrote the word female or male for the gender identity question. For the sexual orientation question, it was a little bit more varied in terms of the types of responses, written responses that we got. Most people wrote the word straight or heterosexual, but many people wrote the word male or female. And so by itself, that doesn't tell us a lot, because it doesn't tell us, it doesn't give us enough context. Like, we had to rely on what their gender identity was as well. So, and some people wrote, I like girls. Again, like, you couldn't just figure out what their sexual orientation was just from reading the actual text. So in terms of, you know, what the Secretariat has offered, the Equity Secretariat, they have offered a number of set options to use for the census data collection for these specific items. And as Trustee Guzzo mentioned, the boards that are a little farther ahead than us, you know, have been using these options. And it just makes for easier coding, but also less variation when it comes to the interpretation, because someone at the board would have to, if we stuck with just open-ended responses, would have to then interpret what the students meant. And because it's anonymous, there's no way for us to then go back and ask someone, you know, what did you mean by I like girls or I like boys? Like, there's no way for us to determine. So we would have to make a judgment call in terms of who goes into which category. So I hope that helps clarify, Sita. I know you're here too. I don't know if you had anything to add with respect to the Secretariat's direction.
Good evening. Good evening. So I didn't, and through you, Madam Chair, I don't have anything to add. I think you've covered everything that that the Secretariat had given to us as directions. So we did have an option to provide different categories under gender identity or sexual orientation, but we chose not to. And as you mentioned, we decided to leave it blank. And that's when the results came back as the way you've explained it.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dewar, you have a follow-up question?
Some good answers there, but yeah, my follow-up question, Mr. Chair, is to Secretary Daly. I just wanted to know what's the scope of work involved and what impediments are there to get this done?
Director Daly, did you want that, or Mr. Cripps, or?
I can start, I guess. There's, as Dr. Collmore noted, we do have a requirement from the ministry to conduct census data survey by 2023. Actually, we got a memo this week from the Equity Secretariat indicating that the work should be started by September of 2022. We've actually mapped out our census. We're hoping for this spring. So in terms of using it, making changes in the census survey, it's really not a matter of work. It's just including the questions. With regards to other forms, things like registration forms or a student information system. We do have the technical capability to do it. It wouldn't involve a lot of work on behalf of staff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Tokiwa, you have the floor.
I just wanted to add that I think that this is a crucial step in creating an environment for students that honors human dignity, which is a core Catholic belief, and action without research is often inaccurate. I believe that this is the right thing to do for students, and it must occur as soon as possible. So I'll be supporting this because it is in the best interest of the students in our board, and it will ensure an equitable, safe, dignifying learning environment for all. Thank you. Through Chair, sorry.
Thank you. Trustee Bowie, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to echo Trustee Tokiwa's sentiments, and even just adding to the fact that this will create a more inclusive environment. I think in the interest of having full transparency and accountability, as well as being able to make the most informed decisions possible at the board level, I think it's important that all of our students feel that they are fully and duly represented in data that we collect, and therefore can inform decisions made on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other trustees who wish to speak to this?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Trustee DeRosa.
I have a technical problem like I had at the last meeting. I can't bring the chat, I can't line up, and it seems to me that my the hand up doesn't seem to work. So whenever I want to say something, I'm going to have to interrupt you. So take that into account until we can figure out what this technical issue is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you want it to be added to the list, maybe in a break, you can just say, please add me, and then I'll put you to the list. So you don't have to wait till the last all time.
Okay, we'll make the best. We'll make the best out of the situation. I do have a question with respect to this situation, and I do understand that there's very little leeway here because it's a mandated requirement from the ministry, and I'm certainly one for following the mandate of the ministry. But how does parent approval come into play for the minors that we are intending to extend this to? Is that a consideration at all, or is the ministry actually take that into account? Can somebody help me understand that aspect of it? Thank you.
Director Daly, is that in the memo that was sent to you?
I'm just, thank you, and through Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question, Trustee DeRosa. So I'm just looking at the updated, it's actually not a memo, but an update from the Secretariat. And I'll rely on maybe Dr. Colomar to correct me if I have this wrong. But as of January 2022, so January of the upcoming year, students, give me 1 second, sorry about this. Boards administering their student census after January 1, 2022. The ministry requires the census questionnaires for students in K to 8 be sent to parents, guardians to complete on behalf of or with their child.
Trustee DeRosa, do you have a follow-up?
So this is being left to the parents to fill out in case of minors, correct?
It's being, thank you. It would be, the census would go to parents to complete on behalf, and I'm reading right from the page here, on behalf of or with their child.
So that would essentially constitute consent.
It's also voluntary too, right? So you don't have to fill out the information.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the lead into that question, because that was my second question. Basically, does this take into account people or students who don't want to answer?
Director Daly?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Trustee DeRosa, this would be voluntary student demographic data.
And that's the way it will be presented to the students' community as a voluntary thing.
Yes, all surveys are voluntary.
Thank you, Director Daly.
You're welcome.
Dr. Collingmore, would you like to speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to confirm that it is a voluntary census survey, so students will be encouraged to fill it out. As you know, we have to do a lot of promotion around the census survey in terms of why we're doing it, the importance of it, and so that will be forthcoming. And the idea is really to get our community familiar with why we're doing this collection and the importance of it. But yes, it will be a voluntary collection, and that will be communicated out to our community.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification.
Yes, Trustee DeRosa.
So the way I understand Dr. Collingmore, this will be encouraged participation.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, the intention, of course, is always to hear from as many people as possible, so we have a good representation, so that when we are doing planning, we have the most numbers that we're able to work with. So from my perspective, it's encouraged. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other trustees that would like to speak to this motion? I don't see any, so I would like to ask a question. We've had debate around the table on percentage of non-Catholic students in high schools, even though I'm assuming it's not considered in the Anti-Racism Act. Would we be looking at that disaggregated data also? Dr. Collingmore, maybe I'll ask you that question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will have that information at the secondary level. How the board decides to use it in terms of its planning will be up to whomever will be looking at that information to make those planning decisions.
Okay, thank you. Seeing that there are no other questions, I will call a vote. Trustee DeRosa?
Mr. Chair, please come back to me.
Okay, Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
Opposed.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chernotta?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
I'm in favor, Mr. Chair, because of ministry mandating.
Thank you, and Trustee Murphy's in favor, so the motion carries. We will go on to item 4.2, Indigenous Studies. The following is a notice of motion from the June 1st, 2021 regular board meeting. Trustee Agnew, would you care to read the motion?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, let me just get okay. Whereas there is a need to create additional educational opportunities specific to Native studies, and whereas the majority of Indigenous history and learning currently happens in our schools, whereas students and parents are generally unaware of the Native studies offered by the ministry, and whereas the Halton Catholic District School Board has written a letter to the Ministry of Education to provide a more inclusive curriculum, be it resolved that the schools include more conversation and promotion of culturally diverse secondary courses such as the Native Studies.
Thank you. This motion was moved by Trustee Agnew. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second, Mr. Chair. Trustee Guzzo.
Seconded by Trustee Guzzo. Trustee Agnew, please open the discussion.
Great. Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair. I can take very little credit for this. This is a motion that came forward from one of our previous student trustees, Trustee Kelly. She did work with myself and Trustee Guzzo on some of her ideas behind this. And so I am going to read to you the explanatory notes. But again, I'm a supporter of this motion. I cannot take credit. So let me just read to you the explanatory notes. Indigenous studies. Many students are unaware of the Native studies and courses that are offered by the Ministry of Education at the secondary level. Anti-Indigenous racism continues to persist, and this includes the discovery of the remains of numerous Indigenous children at the former British Columbia Residential School, and these, as we know now, are not isolated incidents. According to our inclusive racial and cultural curriculum letter, Halton Catholic has advocated for the curriculum to better include the perspectives of underrepresented and marginalized voices. Would this not also include the voices of Indigenous people? The board policy II-45, Equity and Inclusive Education, states, students must be represented in the curriculum and heard in the assessment and evaluation. As it stands, these courses are only offered at a few of our secondary schools, with the biggest reason being that the majority of students and parents are unaware of the existence of such courses or not acknowledging the importance of such courses. The promotion of Native courses would be consistent with our previous and current initiatives concerning equity and inclusion, as well as cultural, responsive, and relevant pedagogy. Therefore, I encourage the Board of Trustees to vote in favor of this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any trustees who would like to speak to this motion or ask a question? Vice Chair Duarte, you have the floor.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I like the motion, but I have a point of clarification, and Trustee Agnew is going to help me if possible, or maybe Sherry. This motion seems, the final last line be it resolved, seems to be very open-ended, and it's got a lot of stuff in that. So question is, are we looking for any specific area of for improving the courses that we have right now? Is there some deficiency in what we are doing? And maybe Trustee Agnew or Sherry could help us if possible, or Director Daly.
Trustee Agnew, would you? Or Director Daly, would you?
Well, I could just speak to perhaps where the gap may exist right now, and then if Director Daly wants to speak to what is currently being done or perhaps what could be done. I don't know if that would work, Trustee Duarte.
Yes, I'm just looking at the last line, be it resolved. It seems very open-ended. Is there something specific?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. And I think that's the point is, the idea behind this motion is really just that, is to include more conversation and promotion of these courses, such as Native studies, and there's others there. But how that is done, I think really is up to senior leadership. It's up to our communications department. It's really how can we as a board find more ways to promote that these courses exist, talk about them, let families know, let students know that they are that they exist, what they are about. I think, my understanding is that is where there is a bit of a gap right now, and that they are wonderful courses. They're so very relevant. We really are trying to educate our students more on Indigenous studies, as one of those areas. And so how can we as a board just do more promotion and talk about these more so that we hopefully get more participation in these courses? That's my understanding from Trustee Kelly and the students that she had been meeting with.
Just a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
So again, are we looking to build it into the curriculum, or just have the conversation that we are talking about, like be it resolved, have the conversation only? So are we not looking at building it as part of our curriculum? So it starts from elementary and goes all the way to secondary.
So the courses are already there, Trustee Duarte. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. So there are already courses that are there, and we have written a letter to the ministry to try to have more inclusive curriculum. But as we know that our ability to change curriculum is quite limited. So it's not so much, it's really about what is currently available right now. I think both at a board level as well as what Native studies are offered by the ministry that we perhaps do not offer. And maybe that's because there is not enough interest in those courses. And is there not enough interest because we're not talking about them enough? Are they not being offered enough? So it's really taking a look and reviewing the current studies that are offered by the ministry. What is available? What are we currently offering? What could we be offering? And then how can we promote those offerings to make sure that as many parents and students are aware of the availability or opportunity to participate and take some of these courses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. You know, I will be supporting this motion. First and foremost, it came from our students in collaboration with Trustee Agnew, because this is something that is important. I didn't have the pleasure of learning about this history when I was growing up in Catholic education. And I think that as a parent now with children in our board, I find myself having to educate myself at the same time. And I wish I had had more opportunities like this so that I understood it. And that is why I think it is so important, is I think that there's a generation that's coming up that have a lot of questions. And as parents, unless we fully understand it, because we didn't know about it, and not because it wasn't known, it was because it wasn't taught to us. And so I think the fact that we can educate and give those options for people to learn about our history and the history of Indigenous, our Indigenous studies, I think that we should be doing it. And I think it's just something that really, if it can be done, why not?
Thank you. Trustee O'Hearn-Chernotta, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Director Daly. So I usually take it from an operational lens. So if this motion were to pass, could you give us, and I don't mean, you know, in writing right now, but a few ideas of how you think you could make this motion work within the Halton Catholic District School Board from an operational lens?
Director Daly?
Sure. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So we do, as Trustee Agnew noted, at the secondary level, we do offer a number of courses in the Native Studies area. Art, English, some that fall more into the social sciences. Indigenous education is in our elementary and secondary curriculum, some of the curriculum more specifically. So I guess a starting point would be to see how many courses are we offering right now. I think we have 5 or 6 high schools that are actually running courses. So all of the I believe all of the high schools offer the courses. We've got 5, 6 schools that are actually running courses this year. I would suggest that it might be valuable for trustees to get a little bit more information on our board action plan for Indigenous education. So we do a yearly plan, and it would be finalized somewhere towards the end of October. I'd have to double check the date, but it is a pretty fulsome plan. It does talk both about what we do with regards to specific courses, but also other supporting work that we do around Indigenous education. So I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Superintendent Kroll and curriculum, but I think that would be a good opportunity for trustees to have a better understanding of some of the things that we are doing.
Trustee O'Hearn, do you have a follow-up?
No, that answers my question. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Trustee DeRosa, did you want to be put on the list?
Yes, please.
Okay, you'll be, so up next we have Trustee O'Brien, then Trustee Masri Amar, and then Trustee DeRosa. Trustee O'Brien, you have the floor. Trustee O'Brien? Maybe we'll come back to Trustee O'Brien. Trustee Masri Amar?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So as someone who did apply for one of these courses, but I was unable to take it because not enough people knew about it, I was pretty heartbroken since it was something that I was very interested in. So my question is, how are we planning to promote these type of courses?
Director Daly, who would be the best to answer that?
I think I can. I think all of our course offerings are promoted. Obviously, if we want to put a special emphasis on our Native Studies programs, that they possibly could be promoted differently. And as our student trustee noted, courses run. Ultimately, they run when there's sufficient number of students who sign up for a course. So a number of students not signing up for a course doesn't necessarily mean it hasn't been well promoted. But certainly, I think the intent of this motion here and what we've heard both from our current student trustees and our former student trustees is that while the courses are out there, we could promote them more. Across the board, the most common Native Studies or Indigenous Ed curriculum course that we offer is in grade 9 art. And we do have the ability to run the courses because of funding at smaller levels. So across the board, we have 21 sections or 21 courses of various Native Studies courses. So a high of 8 classes at one school, and then a number of other schools that have a couple of courses. But certainly, as in any course selection, the more a course can be promoted, the more likely it is for students to select a particular course, especially if it's not a mandatory credit. And having taught in a subject area that only had one mandatory credit, you do need to go out and sell your courses for sure. So I think it's well taken that we could probably do some additional work in terms of promoting the value of the courses, both to students and to our parents as well.
Trustee Masri Amar, do you have another question or a follow-up question?
No, I'm okay. Thank you so much.
Trustee O'Brien, are you back with us?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I had a little tech problem there, but I am back. I want to thank Trustee Agnew and Trustee Kelly for bringing this motion forward. It certainly has quite an appeal. Certainly appeals to me. And I was just wondering, it's called Indigenous Studies, and a question I'm kind of putting out in the Be It Resolved that says, Be It Resolved schools include more conversation and promotion of culturally diverse secondary courses. So I know there are Native Studies courses out there. I just worked with a student in our board in something to do with getting admitted to our system, and she was from a Indigenous community in South America. So I'm wondering, Trustee Agnew, where it says culturally diverse secondary courses, if you know, you might, in voting for this, which I hope to do that, you would be open to Native Studies kind of on a global lens.
Trustee Agnew, did you want to comment on that?
Certainly. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee O'Brien. I would have no hesitation with that. I can't speak in depth about all of the current offerings by the ministry as far as Native Studies are related, but absolutely, if we have an opportunity and there is a course available, and we have an opportunity to take a look at it and possibly offer it to our students and promote it and talk about it and encourage participation for those who may be interested, I see no downside to that at all.
Trustee O'Brien, do you have a follow-up?
No, but thank you. But just a comment, I want to thank again Trustee Agnew Kelly for bringing this forward, and I definitely will be supporting this.
Thank you. Trustee DeRosa, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was seeking to establish what is being taught now and whether we are really dealing with the issue. I'm glad to hear that there is a program and that will be an implementation program that's coming together by the end of October. And I'm certainly anxious to see what that plan is. I was hoping that maybe we could establish in a particular way and a more secure, definite way what is being offered today. Because what I'm hearing from the field, if I could call it that, some teachers and so on and so forth, is that we already have a fulsome program in place in terms of courses. The problem may be is that we have is promoting it better. So to pick up from Trustee Duarte's comment as to this this motion being quite expansive and wide-ranging, it casts a big net. So I certainly wouldn't want it to overshadow what we are doing now today. So that's the point I want to make. Director Daly, the plan that's coming up in October, can you give us a little bit of an anticipated hint as to what it will include? Or maybe should we wait till that plan is actually rolled out before this motion is actually approved?
I think Director Daly is, well, mind you, he just grimaced, so I'm not sure exactly what that means, but we'll give him the floor.
Yeah, just give me 1 in here. So 1 minute. So the plan that's coming out at the end of October is not a new plan per se. We do a board action plan for Indigenous education each year. So we identify needs and then initiatives to try and meet those needs. We do try and measure outcomes. We do report back to the ministry around what our results are. So some of them are specific to, for example, if we saw a need for professional development for our teachers, then an initiative would be to provide that professional development in some way. We might measure that by number of people in service. We might measure it by feedback from staff around how it's been received or how they've implemented it in their class. If one of the needs, our identified needs, was that we are hopeful that students will actually take more of the secondary school courses that are specific to First Nation, Métis, and Inuit studies, then it could be we're setting a baseline this year of 21 courses. We want to see it hopefully grow to 30 courses, 30, 35, 40. So there are, it is a kind of identifying needs, identifying initiatives, determining how we'll measure the outcomes, what the tool will be to measure them, a result, and then also applying our budget in Indigenous education to those areas. So again, it could be things like around PD, it might be more emphasis in our new teacher induction program around Indigenous education. It could be training more teachers to be more comfortable in teaching these specific curricular courses like we would in math or other areas. So it's fairly broad ranging, Trustee DeRosa, but I hope that gives you a sense of what is typically in our board action plan.
It certainly does. Thank you very much.
Did you have a follow-up, Trustee DeRosa?
No, I would have liked to witness the grimace from.
We'll try and get him on hidden camera next time.
All right.
Trustee Bowie, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to share a bit of my own experience, just as Trustee Masri Amar did with the Native Studies program at school. I know at my school there are a number of offerings, but I'm now in grade 11, and I only found out about the existence of these courses and their promotion really at the end of last year, after I had mainly selected all of my courses for the past 3 years. So I definitely think that when it comes to promotion of these courses, specifically student-driven promotion, and I think the Director Daly for his information surrounding what can occur on the staff end of things. But in terms of specifically reaching out to students, I have a question for the director, which is there any way that the board has capabilities to promote these types of courses directly to students, or would this be through potentially professional development and encouraging senior administrations to promote these courses in their schools? Like, if this motion were to pass, what promotion could that potentially lead to?
Director Daly?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. That's a great question. I think my experience at the secondary level, both as a teacher and as an administrator, is that promotion or encouragement around particular course offerings are best done at the school level. Ideally, we would see in many course offerings that are not mandatory courses, that a particular teacher champion who really has a lot of passion for a course can encourage students, draw students. I know when I taught, grade 10 history, every student has to take grade 10 history. They don't have to take another history beyond that. If I wanted to teach grade 11 or 12 history, I had to make grade 10 history engaging enough that students would think about taking it again as one of their course offerings. So I really do think that courses best come alive at the school level. I think if there's additional supports that we need to provide for teachers to make that happen, that would certainly be something that we would include in our board action plan.
Trustee Bowie, do you have another question?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to say that, and as a history student myself, I appreciate that because the history classes do tend to be small. But unfortunately, our Native Studies classes don't have a required course to potentially proceed entry into that program. So I think promotion is a little bit difficult there. And I think that including that in the action plan would be good. As a suggestion and potentially an inquiry to the director about how this could potentially go, is there any way that we can create potentially more social media promotion or promotion on board and school websites? And is that something that we can do board wide?
We may want to reach out to our communications manager. I'm not sure how savvy Director Daly is with his Twitter feed.
Actually, Director Daly is quite savvy.
Oh, my apologies.
I think that and my senior level history courses were packed with students, I might add. I think it's I think that is something that's kind of embedded within the motion. Student trustee brings up a good point that something for consideration is, for example, would we decide at some point that, our grade 9 art course, which students have to take an art, they don't have to take grade 9 art, but do we say our grade 9 art course is an Indigenous art course, and that's what we're going to offer across the board in grade 9 art, or in grade 11 English, or grade 12 English. So I think there are ways to do that. And again, I think our Indigenous Education Advisory Council, which is made up of obviously of our Indigenous Ed Advisor, but also some staff. I think it's always valuable to gain some student thought on how we best, and I hate to use the word market, but market courses. So students and parents, quite honestly, see them as being valuable and worthwhile, and something that even if they're not mandatory courses, they have a value in many other ways that maybe don't necessarily lead to a specific career path. So I think all of those suggestions are something that I think are inherent in the motion and that we would want to incorporate into the board action plan.
Thank you, Director Daly. Are there any other trustees who want to speak? I see Trustee Agnew has her hand up, but she's closing. So if nobody else would like to speak, Trustee Agnew, you have the floor to close.
Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate everybody's questions and input. And again, even to Trustee O'Hairn-Zernata's point, from an operational perspective, I don't see any interference here. What we're asking for, or what this motion is asking for, is just simply to take a look at how we're currently promoting these courses, again, such as Native Studies. How are we promoting them? How are we discussing them? I appreciate, the roadmap, or the roadmap that Director Daly is speaking to, but I don't know that it specifically addresses the concern that's been brought forward in this motion. And again, it's just as a way to keep top of mind, is there things that we can be doing to better promote these courses? Maybe that, to Director Daly's point, maybe we don't have participation because people just don't want to take it, but we don't know that for sure. Maybe we don't have participation because people don't know about it. So at least if we promote it and we do, a dedicated job of making sure the information is out there, and we make a dedicated effort, and we still don't have participation, then we know that it wasn't from a lack of promotion or a lack of providing the information. So that's what this is. It's just a move to try to be a little bit more mindful of these studies, the importance of them, and the importance of promoting those, so that students and parents know that those options exist and why it may be important to take those courses. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Trustee Agnew. We will now go to a recorded vote. Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Zernata?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
In favor.
And Trustee Murphy's in favor, so the motion carries. Item 4.3, Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. This is a notice of motion from the June 1st, 2021 regular board meeting. Trustee Agnew, would you please read the motion?
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Chair, again, I can take very little credit for this. This is another motion that Trustee Kelly worked with myself and Trustee Guzzo on. So let me go ahead and read this for you here. I know that it is quite cumbersome, but it's all very important. So whereas the statement released by the Director of Education on June the 1st, 2020 regarding recent events of anti-Black racism expresses that let us be sources of peace, comfort, and healing to one another as we work together to create a world that is free from all forms of racism, discrimination, and hatred. And whereas our Halton Catholic District School Board students have reached out about their experiences of racism in our school, including incidences of the use of racial slurs, assumptions, and stereotyping of racialized students, international students being stigmatized about their lack of assimilation, accents, and culture, thus causing fear to interact with Canadian students, and jokes being made at the expense of racialized students. And whereas the HCDSB Board Operating Policy II-45, Equity and Inclusive Education states, the board recognizes that any form of social or cultural discrimination is incompatible with Catholic moral principles and is in violation of the Ontario Human Rights Code. Be it resolved that the Director of Education and the Secretary of the Board direct staff to create an Indigenous Education Action Roadmap and a separate Human Rights and Equity Roadmap on the HCDSB website in regards to equity initiatives. These initiatives include examples such as culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy by shining light on the allocation of budgets to support learning on anti-racism, anti-oppression, and tackling discrimination to build on inclusive learning and tackling discrimination in the classroom. The end goal being that all staff, students, parents, and stakeholders of HCDSB will be consistently informed of all of the internal happenings regarding such by January 2022. Okay, we at the top there, Rosie? Okay. Be it further, good? Okay. Be it further resolved that by the start of the 2021-2022 school year, HCDSB will provide accessible resources on its online platforms regarding preventing and responding to discrimination specific to racism, homophobia, and transphobia in an educational environment. And be it further resolved that HCDSB and its individual schools and staff deliberately seek out the voices of students from diverse social identities to guide decision-making, example, forming student advisory committees, allowing for more seats for student voices to be heard on subcommittees, conducting roundtable discussions, conducting outreach to student clubs and organizations to be implemented in the first quarter of the 2022 school year. Realize we're already out of date there. Be it further resolved that anti-racism training be mandated for all teachers, administrators, staff, and students to be completed annually, utilizing the training that is already provided. Be it further resolved that the school resource officer program be reviewed to determine whether or not the program has fulfilled its mandate prior to the 2021-2022 school year. Be it further resolved that staff continue to create and promote mental health resources catered specifically to the unique experiences of racialized and culturally diverse students. These resources will be presented in a staff report to trustees. Again, this is a little bit out of date. By October the 5th, 2021 board meeting. And be it further resolved that the effectiveness, equity, and outcomes of the overall practice of streaming be reviewed as a part of the race-based student data collection in both the pilot and the final board-wide data collection.
Thank you. So this motion was moved by Trustee Agnew. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it, Trustee Guzzo.
Seconded by Trustee Guzzo. Trustee Agnew, you have the floor to open discussion.
Great. Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair, and recognizing that there's already some edits that will need to be made to that motion with respect to timing, because as we know, it was a motion that came forward that was written previously, and we just haven't gotten it to it until now. And so again, I'm going to quote from some of the explanatory notes that were provided by Trustee Kelly, or former student Trustee Kelly. And we have also, we did also speak with CETA about this motion. And so students have reached out about experiences of racism in HCDSB schools, including incidences of the use of racial slurs, students assuming and stereotyping racialized students, students stigmatizing international students, as we said, and ultimately making fun of racialized students. Additionally, students in the past have touched upon how they feel racially underrepresented in school among staff and other peers, including those who have delegated to pass the motion of inclusive racial and cultural curriculum letter and the amendment of policy I-26. The Halton Catholic District School Board needs to address and disrupt the ostracization that these students face with an inclusive and equitable approach to eliminate the bridge to disparities that have been presented. Students are only able to reach their full potential in a learning environment that prioritizes their dignity. Inspired by the actions of the Ottawa Carleton District School Board in their Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap of 2020 to 2023, the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap is a motion that aims to shed light on the current equity-based internal initiatives of the HCDSB. It aims to center students' voices that are often underrepresented and aims to take proactive steps to bridge the inequities that many marginalized students face. Many student delegations have already touched upon the lack of consideration of student voice at a board level. This motion can help to further uplift student voices and help create a safer learning environment for all students. And as such, I please urge you to vote in favor of this motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Agnew. On the speakers list, we have Vice Chair Duarte. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, it's just a request here. There are 7 parts to this motion. My request is, can we either discuss each be it resolved separately or split the motion into 7 parts? You can go on the table and ask the trustees what they think, but if you do not have that, we'll be jumping all over the place.
Yes, so we can ask Parliamentary Kapoor for verification of this. So my understanding is that any trustee individually can ask for parts of the motion to be handled separately as individual votes, provided that point can stand on its own and is not linked to one of the others. Is that correct, Parliamentarian Kapoor?
Yes, Chair. That if they can stand on their own, the part can be divided. Otherwise, you can decide to go through them in order one by one and then take a final decision on the entire document as a whole.
Okay, I think it would be better if we go on them one by one and then we can make a decision as a whole, unless there's somebody that is opposed to that, and then we could vote on them all individually. Is there anybody opposed to handling each point on its own?
Mr. Chair, I think they all kind of tie into each other. So depending on how it goes, one might impact the other. That's the only thing we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, so, but if I'm looking at them, each action, even though the subject is related, they're actions that would stand on their own. So one is not dependent on the other. For example, the first bullet point doesn't have to be done for the second to occur, and so on. I could be wrong, but based on my quick review of it, I think each one of them looks like they could stand on their own.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Trustee DeRosa?
I would suggest that we would not be doing justice to these points, which are very, very valid points, if we don't consider them separately, because to your point, they do stand alone and they're on their own merit. So I would suggest that we do vote on them separately.
It's well within a trustee's right to request that. So we will look at the first point. So the speakers list.
Mr. Chair, just a question, a clarification. Then are we voting on them separately? Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. So we will be addressing the first, be it resolved. And we'll be discussing and debating on the merits of just that paragraph, and then we'll vote on just that paragraph. So I'm not sure if that changes the speakers list. Right now we have Vice Chair Duarte, Trustee Guzzo, and Trustee O'Brien. So I'll go through the list, and if your point doesn't relate to that specific paragraph, then we can move on, and if nobody has any questions, we can vote on that specific paragraph.
Could you add me to that list, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I will. Trustee DeRosa. Okay. Vice Chair Duarte, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the first point, I think Director Daly said we have the roadmap already in place, so it's going to be in place. So I'm just wondering from Trustee Agnew if we can update this. Anything needs to be updated in this first item. Trustee Agnew, I'm not sure.
So could we verify that, maybe we can ask the director, right now, does the roadmap include Indigenous and human rights equity? Is it one roadmap or are there two separate?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Roadmap is not a term that I would say we are familiar with in our board. We don't use that. We don't use that terminology. We would probably say an equity action plan or an Indigenous education action plan. Some of the elements that are included in the first be it resolved are included on the board website under the Human Rights and Equity tab. So things like responding with faith, hope, and love to racism and discrimination, CRRP. So some of those elements are there. Again, I don't want to get caught up in terminology too much, but roadmap is not a term that we've used. If it means plan, then I think we are working on both an Indigenous education plan yearly and a human rights and equity plan as well.
Trustee Guzzo, did you want to clarify the intent of that paragraph?
No, but Trustee Agnew might.
I was just going to say,
I was doing so well for a couple of meetings.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So could you just scroll up, Rosie, if you don't mind? Sorry. Yes, and obviously recognizing, and I don't know when Director Daly spoke earlier about the Indigenous plan, I don't know when that was started. That may have started after this came out, so certainly that needs a little bit of updating. With respect to the term roadmap, we did speak with Sita, so she was familiar with that terminology and didn't seem to have any issue with it. I don't want to put her on the spot if she's here, but that wasn't a concern. I think the idea is, yes, as well, we do have some of those items on our website. The idea is to make this a clearer, more concise way to follow all of the information that's available. hence the term roadmap, so that it's easier for people to know what is being done, how it's being done, the timelines in which it's happening, all of those pieces. And so if we are already doing that with our Indigenous, with the Indigenous piece, great. I don't know what that's going to look like as far as how it's designed and the content that it's going to include. But then I guess just a confirmation that we are in fact doing the same thing with equity and inclusion, and that again, it's being laid out in a way that would speak to this motion. So I don't know if Director Daly or Sita or somebody can provide some clarity around that.
Maybe Sita, if from the board perspective, if we pass this part of the resolution, is there a good understanding of what we would be doing, or is there, we're doing some of it now and not some, or maybe you could give us an overview of that, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, I don't want to sort of get too tied to the terminology, but so our equity and inclusive education policy and the procedures are truly the roadmap for what we're supposed to do and what we've committed to do as a board. And from that, we can have an action plan, and we do have not a formalized action plan, but we do have that. My plan for the year is the action plan based on the policy and procedure, which is our, so to speak, our roadmap for the work around human rights and equity and inclusion. And we can then, cull that out, I guess, and specifically tailor an action plan and publish it as such. But that is part of the work that I am doing. And as was mentioned, it is on our board website under the Human Rights and Equity tab, and speaks to many of these things around the kind of training we've had at the beginning of last year around anti-racism, anti-Black racism, which all schools were mandated to do. It has the work that we've done so far around culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy. So a lot of that is under that tab already, but our E&I policy is truly our sort of our roadmap or our guide for the work that needs to happen. Does that?
So to clarify, would it be safe to say if this portion is passed, it will be collating or combining that information in more concise, I don't want to use the term silos, but in a more condensed, defined area, and then there would be additional action items added? Is that the correct assumption?
Yeah, definitely we could put that out separately as an action plan.
Okay.
But based on the policy.
Perfect. Vice Chair Duarte, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
No follow-up.
Okay. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Trustee Guzzo's had to take a bio break. Could you go to the next person and she will jump back in line?
Certainly, I'll come back to Trustee Guzzo. Trustee O'Brien, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, I can see to my spot. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee DeRosa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Notionally, I think I understand what we're trying to achieve here, but I must admit it's still nebulous in my mind. So hopefully I'll clarify it as others speakers take their turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go back to see if Trustee Guzzo is back. No. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak to this point, which I'm labeling as 4.3.1? No? Okay. We can go to a recorded vote on this action item. Trustee O'Brien?
Opposed.
Trustee Ahern-Ternata?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie,
Abstain, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Masri Amar,
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa,
In favor.
thank you. Trustee Agnew,
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa,
I'm opposed, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Duarte,
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo,
In favor.
Trustee Murphy's in favor, so the motion carries. On 4.3.1, we'll move to the next. Be it resolved. So be it resolved, the paragraph that starts that by the start of 2021, 2022. By consensus, do we need to change that to a certain month or date?
Yes.
Yes.
What would you prefer to see in there, Trustee Agnew?
I'm not ignoring you. I'm just thinking.
You wouldn't be the last person that ignored me.
Sorry, can you just go, can you just move that up for a second? I'm going to pull it up on my own. It's okay.
So it says, be it resolved that by the start of 2021-2022 school year, HCDSB will provide accessible resources on its online platforms regarding preventing and responding to discrimination specific to racism, homophobia, transphobia in an educational environment.
Okay, yeah. So I think for this one, when this was put out at the time, I think it was probably giving sufficient time to upload or to have some of these resources available. Obviously, we're already in the beginning of that school year, so I would defer to staff, I think, on how long they thought it might take for them to upload. I see Sita has her hand up, to upload some of these resources or to make them more available or coherent. So I would defer to staff on that.
Sita, could you comment on the timing?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, is that we had earlier in the year released the protocol, Racism and Discrimination, Responding with Faith, Hope, and Love, that is rooted in the concepts of, the Ontario Human Rights Code, protected grounds, and how to respond to harmful language. So that's a protocol with sort of 4 clear steps that was developed by a subcommittee of the Equity and Inclusive Education Steering Committee, and that has already been uploaded onto our that same link, a tab that I was referring to earlier, and we've done training sessions with different staff groups around how to understand that document, how to use those 4 steps to prevent, and we've also created resources for elementary school students for administrators or teachers to use that to have that conversation about how to respond to that kind of harmful language, and we're in the process of creating resources for secondary students as well. And so that protocol itself is on our website. And as you were mentioning this, I think it would be fairly easy to upload the training resource for students onto that as well, and sort of make that accessible. By no means is that the only thing, but sort of those are some steps that we've already done, and that's the work that's happened. Yes, thank you, Andrea, or whoever is sharing that. So this is already on our website right now.
So could I just clarify, would that be okay through you, Mr. Chair, for a second? Because I'm just wondering if we even need that, be it resolved there. Sita, to your point, it sounds like some of the stuff is already there. It sounds like you're in the process of creating additional resources that are automatically going to be uploaded, which is fantastic. So if that's already in progress, and if it's something you're already working towards, and that's the goal is to have those up this year, that particular be it resolved may be null and void if you're already doing it.
Do we have any opposition on removing that point? Because it's already in motion? Okay, doesn't sound like
I
it, so
just
we'll.
have one question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Trustee DeRosa?
And that's, and I'm glad that's already, that the spirit of this motion is already in the process of being implemented. But my question is, can somebody help me understand what is intended by the word responding in this?
CETA, I would assume, would be the best to respond to that.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So the notion of responding is then when anybody witnesses harmful language or behavior based on any of the Ontario Human Rights Code protected grounds, how do we stop that behavior, disrupt it, support the person who's been, who's been impacted by that comment? How do we ensure accountability, and how do we restore dignity at the system, sort of at the individual, but also at the systemic level? So that is what we mean by responding. So to disrupt and reframe with hope, faith, hope, and love.
Thank you.
Trustee, do you have a follow-up, Trustee DeRosa?
No, that's okay, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to strike out of the motion that be it resolved. We'll move on to the next item, which is it be it further resolved that HCDSB and its individual schools and staff deliberately seek out voices of students. So if everybody can refer to that paragraph. I'll open up the speakers list for that item. Would anybody like to speak to that or have any questions regarding? If not, we'll go to a recorded vote. No? Okay, we'll go to a recorded vote.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Trustee DeRosa?
I would just like to make one comment. This, as we're going through this one by one, this motion was entitled Indigenous, relates to the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. But the Indigenous are mentioned very few times. So it seems to me that this is a motion that was intended for the Indigenous equity and human rights. But as we're going through, Mr. Chair, I'd like to finish my statement.
Yep, please finish your point.
So it seems to me, and maybe it's just my impression, but as we're going through all of the be it resolved, this motion seems to be taking a wider scope. That's all my point. Is that the case? Is that the intent? Because somewhere down the road, the Indigenous community doesn't get mentioned anymore. So
may I have my point of order?
I need to understand.
So, Trustee DeRosa, the way I read it, it's Indigenous, equity and human rights. So it's encompassing all, not only Indigenous, but other groups as well. I don't think, and maybe Trustee Agnew, you can comment, the intent wasn't to focus solely on Indigenous, the Indigenous community. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And as you have pointed out, the title of the motion is not specific to Indigenous. It is speaking about other groups as well, and that is what is referenced throughout. Would be happy if Trustee DeRosa needed us to insert Indigenous more regularly in the body of this motion, but I think probably the majority of people understand what the goal of it is. And I don't think it's actually going down a different path. I think it's actually quite concise in the goals. There's just a number of steps that are involved. Thank you.
So the intent is that it's covering more groups than just Indigenous. Indigenous was
I would respectfully.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair. Just a comment. I would, and I'm not gonna belabor this, but if we're talking about the Indigenous, then the title should be changed.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, and if I'm not mistaken, point of order needs to be recognized.
What's your point of order, Trustee Guzzo?
Thank you. We're not, as trustees, we are not to debate a motion's title once it's been moved and seconded. That's not what we are here to do. This belongs to the board. And Trustee DeRosa has had this in his hands since the June meeting to raise this point.
So I'll respond to your point of order. I believe what Trustee DeRosa is looking for is clarification and understanding the subject matter of the motion, which is basically what we have been talking about. So it's not only the Indigenous community, it's all other communities that would benefit from this motion, Trustee DeRosa. So that's where if you look at Indigenous, equity and human rights. So it's equity and human rights refers to other groups other than the Indigenous community.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Chair. So in effect, I would respectfully maintain that, yes, we've had the motion, but the motion is being debated. And I'm within my right to ask these questions so that I can vote appropriately. I have to understand what I'm being asked to vote on, Mr. Chair. And this is what the democratic process around the table is. So
yes, and that's why I ruled on the point of order as I did, because my understanding was you were asking for clarification, and that's what I believe we have tried to do.
Thank you, Mr.
Quite a
Chair.
privilege, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Trustee Guzzo.
Do point of orders not in Robert's Rules of Order and in our bylaws, do point of orders not stop and have to be addressed before a trustee can continue on? Do they not overrule that?
Yes, they do.
Thank you for clarifying.
No problem. So we will now vote on item 4.3.3, which is the paragraph, be it further resolved that HCDSB and its individual schools and staff deliberately seek out student voices. I trust, since there are no other questions, everybody has made themselves familiar with that paragraph. Trustee Guzzo, how do you vote?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chernata?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
Regrettably, Mr. Chair, I'm still confused, so I'm going to abstain.
Thank you. Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy's in favor, so that motion carries. We'll move on to 4.3.4, which is the be it further resolved that anti-racism training be mandated. Do we have anybody who would like to speak to this or any questions regarding this? If not, we'll go to a recorded vote. Vice Chair Duarte?
Mr. Chair, this is a point of clarification again to Secretary Daly. What are we doing right now? Do we not have this in place?
Director Daly, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of anti-racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, we do offer a number of voluntary professional development opportunities for our staff. I think they'd be kind of under our Human Rights and Equity Parts 1, 2, and 3. So those are programs that we've developed in-house that CETA leads or CETA and guest speakers. We do have anti-racism training, professional development for our senior staff. Trustees have undergone some of their own professional development. Our staff are required to do a module on the Ontario Human Rights Code as part of mandatory yearly training. The Ministry of Education requires us, or has required us for the last couple of years to include, I guess we would say in general terms, anti-racism training for one of our professional development days. So I guess I would, and I could ask CETA maybe to add to that, or maybe to ask what other specific elements are we looking for in the actual motion.
CETA, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you. So Director Daly has covered a number of like sessions that we offer that a staff can take up, and there's always been a very robust uptake of those sessions. Just building a little bit on last year's ministry mandated anti-racism training, we chose as a board to focus on anti-Black racism, and all schools were mandated to do a 3-part training, which also included a anti-racism action plan that all schools had to develop based on their own specific context within their schools. And that was really successful, and schools have an action plan as well. So that was the mandatory piece that we've done. All other sessions have been offered, and again, as I said, there's been a really good uptake of those sessions. And this year as well, or this school year as well, in April, there is a ministry mandated E&I PA Day, and anti-discrimination and anti-racism is supposed to be part of that. And beyond that, we also build in anti-racism in pretty much all other trainings as well. So even at the beginning of the school year, when we had to do a PA Day on the de-streamed grade 9 math, along with that, we offered an introduction to culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, where a big focus of it is on anti-racism. That was a session that all schools participated in as well.
I do have a follow-up. So my question, Mr. Chair, is if we mandate this training to teachers and staff, what is the mechanism to make sure that it is well received? Do we have some kind of a quiz or something at the end, or is it just training given and we forget about that? I really want it to be effective. How do we ensure that it's effective?
Director Daly, do you?
Well, I think maybe I can ask Sita to talk about some of the ways that we gain feedback on some of the PD that we do. And to be honest, Vice Chair Duarte, she'll probably be speaking more to the voluntary or optional training as opposed to the mandatory training. But I'll maybe let Sita touch on that if she could.
Sita, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, we do after each of the E&I sessions, and some of them have 6 modules, some of them have 4 modules, and a combination of anti-racism and a training. We ask for feedback, and a certificate is given only after participants have completed that online survey. And so we gather feedback from there to understand, what are the learnings and where can we go in terms of next steps. So that happens. It also, the anti-Black racism training that I mentioned at the beginning of last year, we also had an evaluation on that, and together, how did that training help schools develop an action plan. So the action plan is the piece then that ties into the accountability and keeps that work going and doesn't just make it a one-off. So those are some of the ways in which we've gathered that. There was one more point that I was thinking of, which is escaping me right now, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. Right, that's right. So if I may add, it's just come back, is also the way to sort of keep the work moving and not have it as a one-off training and not to come back to it. 2 years ago, we had looked at the school improvement planning and embedded culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy as a piece right into the school improvement planning. And so the idea was, as administrators did their annual school planning, understanding of anti-racism would be part of their school improvement planning goals, and the culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, which has a focus on anti-racism, was embedded right in the school improvement planning tool.
Thank you, Sita. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I really do think that this is such an important piece. I think, Sita has done such a wonderful job in the modules that have been offered, but once again, they are not mandatory, they are voluntary. And I know that there is so much that teachers and staff already have to deal with. However, if we make it mandatory, that means we're making time specific to this to say this is important, that everybody knows this and understands it, and that we're all on the same page and that we are all moving towards dealing with anti-racism training, and because we want to work towards eliminating it. And one way to do that and to take the lead on that is by mandating it and not making it optional. So I will be supporting this, and thank you for, it really was truly wonderful to have, we've had such amazing student trustees who really see the value in all of this, and we've learned so much from them, and I'm so looking forward to learning from the new trustees that we have at the table.
Thank you. Trustee Agnew, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. And just to, to echo Trustee Guzzo, and I'm certainly encouraged by what Sita had to say with respect to the participation in these trainings. And I agree, the board has done a tremendous job. I'm very proud of the effort that has gone in, the training that has been provided, the professional development sessions, the follow-up, the feedback. That is fantastic. And again, I'm happy to hear that they're well attended. So, to that point, I do truly believe that we need to take it one step further and mandate this training. If it is so well attended, I don't think that would be an issue. And with that mandate, then we just know for a fact that it is going to happen. I think it's extremely vital that we have that and utilize the fantastic resources and training that we already have available. Let's just make sure it's mandated. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bowie, you have the floor.
Yes, and thank you. And through you to Mr. Chair, I'd just like to point out one of my reasons for supporting this motion being specifically highlighting the fact that this talks about mandating training for students. As it stands right now, I believe, in my experience, that we do not have such training mandated for students to attend. I know that my school did that last year, and I know that it was a very rewarding and enriching students experience for all students that were involved. I know that I got a lot out of it. So I would just like to say that that particularly drew my attention, and I'm very happy to support this motion.
Thank you. If no other trustees would like to speak to this, we can.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Trustee DeRosa, you have the floor.
I have a question for Director Daly. I'm happy to support this this particular section, but can Director Daly explain to me how the collective agreement works into this particular motion?
Director Daly, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through Mr. Chair. I'm not 100% sure what you might be asking, Trustee DeRosa, but certainly any professional development that's mandated would have to take place within the bounds of the instructional day. So there would be some teacher release time involved. So I don't know if that's a collective agreement issue per se, but the board, I mean, the board does have the right to train staff in a way that it sees fit to maintain its mandate.
So whatever training is mandated has to happen within the time frames within the collective agreement. We have to make time within the normal day. Is that correct?
Yes, within the normal day or a normal day with a staff meeting. But yes, within the normal day as we would provide any other sort of professional development. That's correct.
Mr. Chair, can I have a follow-up?
Yes, please go ahead.
Director Daly, is that time available within the normal day that we know today?
Well, any professional development that staff would undertake would involve some release time. I mean, you can't do professional development while you're teaching your class. So we would have to afford, depending on what the training looks like, we would have to afford quite likely some release time, but it could be a combination of things that happen during the day. It could, and again, I'm thinking of the two different levels. It could be delivered via staff meetings. It could be delivered via department meetings. It would probably be a combination of all of those things.
Are we in a, sorry, Mr. Chair, may I have another question? My last one.
Yes, there's nobody else who has their hands up. Please go ahead.
So are we expecting to refer this particular section to the union for their input?
Director Daly?
I think, I believe we do have, I believe we have union representation or association representation on our Human Rights and Equity Advisory Committee. So it certainly would be something that we could discuss there. Certainly the mandate from the ministry with regards to human rights and equity is clear. So it would come as no surprise to our teachers and our other staff that this would be something that would be important. They've, as Sita's noted, and I think I've noted as well, in terms of the voluntary PD that we've done, there's been great uptake from our teaching staff, from all of our educators across the board. Probably the only thing that's limited some additional training at this point is a little bit of our inability to continue to have Sita deliver it on her own. As well, in terms of PD planning that we do, professional development planning, we do have a PD planning committee, a joint committee that involves our staff and our union partners as well, both at elementary and secondary.
Thank you, Director Daly.
Thank you. So we'll go to a recorded vote. Trustee O'Hearn, Jornada.
Hi, sorry, I'm in favor.
Favor. Trustee Bowie. Trustee Bowie. We'll come back to Trustee Bowie. Trustee Masri Amar.
I'm in favor.
Trustee Tokiwa.
In favor.
Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa.
I'm in favor.
Vice Chair Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
I'm satisfied with the present PD, so I'm going to vote opposed.
Trustee Bowie. We may have lost Trustee Bowie. Trustee Murphy's in favor, so the motion carries. We are on to item 4.3.5, which is the paragraph regarding the school resource officer. The date has to change since it says prior to the 2021-2022 school year. Trustee Agnew, did you have a date in mind, or did we want to pick December 1st? If that gives enough time.
Yeah, I would be totally fine with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
By consensus,
No
do we agree December 1st? Is anybody opposed to December 1st? Seeing that there's nobody opposed, so we'll change that to December 1st. We can open up the speakers list to item 4.3.5, which relates to the school resource officer. Trustee DeRosa, did you want to speak to it?
Yes, put me on the list.
I think you are, well, Vice Chair Duarte. Oh, so it's Vice Chair Duarte, then you. Vice Chair Duarte, you have the floor.
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is a learning moment for me. So, Secretary Daly, could you just let me know, or let us know what the school resource officer program is and what its mandate? So, this is a learning moment.
Director Daly.
Thank you, and through Mr. Chair, and I might redirect that to a couple of our superintendents. And while school resource officer is kind of a commonly used term, it's not the term that we use here in Halton. We refer to our, and again, we're talking about high school liaison officers, but I know other boards do use the SRO sort of acronym, but again, it's not the one that we use. So maybe I'll ask Superintendent Kroll has had some responsibilities on this particular portfolio, as well as Superintendent Cordero. And then I can also speak to it from a perspective of a secondary principal, but maybe Superintendent Cordero, if you can just start off with regards to some of the roles that our liaison officers play in the schools.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Director Daly, and through you, Mr. Chair. The high school and the elementary liaison officers serve multiple purposes of one, educating students on different programs, whether it's the MAD program or RIDE or other programs that are educational in nature, anti-sex trafficking, human trafficking, anti-drug education programs, and so forth. So they often participate with other community partners in presentations directly made to students. They also serve the purpose of sometimes addressing concerns that are brought to their attention by either families or a student who might have been victimized, or the school administration to assist with an investigation that may lead to a potential charge like a physical assault, or a student being placed on a diversion program, or the trafficking of drugs or whatnot. So they serve a variety of educational and assisting roles in investigations that become community-based and not necessarily school-based, because once an investigation is begun by the high school or elementary liaison officer, then the current investigation by the school ceases until that investigation by the police is complete, and then the school will resume its investigation, which may or may not lead to disciplinary action, depending on findings.
Thank you. Superintendent Kroll, did you have any context to add?
Sure. Only just to point out that the officers that are school liaison officers are officers who identify wanting to work with youth. They receive specialized training as part of the school liaison officer program. Their mandate is really kind of around community-based policing. So it is really about trying to become a positive influence and form relationships within school communities. They want, officers don't just come when there's problems, but they want to be there and be visible, be faces that students can recognize and reach out to if they have concerns. So as again, it is sort of that larger mandate with Halton Regional Police, that community-based policing.
Thank you. Director Daly, did you have any to add?
I don't think so. Just that Halton Region Police has been a really important partner with us for many, many years. And certainly I can speak to that from my experience when I was a secondary teacher, vice principal, and principal. And I think it might be beneficial for trustees if we could certainly invite a representative from the regional police to talk a little bit more about how they see their role. We do share the program to a certain extent with the public board as well, but like I said, they've been an important partner of our board since I've been around, and I'm sure before that as well.
Thank you. Vice Chair Duarte, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do have a follow-up. So to me, it sounds like this program is doing really well in all our schools. So I'm just wondering, what is the need for this section of the motion here? Are we looking for something specific? Trustee Agnew or somebody could answer this.
Trustee Agnew, can you comment to that? You wish to comment?
Yeah, I can try to. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and to Trustee Duarte. So I can only speak to it as Trustee Kelly had brought forward, and that was just to, as it says, it's just to make sure how the program is going and whether or not the program has fulfilled its mandate. Superintendent Cordero gave us a little bit of insight as well. Perhaps, I would be amenable to removing this if, like Director Daly said, perhaps there's more value at this point in having a presentation to the trustees. As you mentioned, that could be more relevant. I'm completely open to that. If we don't feel like this, if we feel like what we've heard tonight is that the program is working, and we don't require anything formal to assess that, I would be fine with removing this point. And again, just to see if perhaps we could have that presentation.
Is anybody opposed to removing this point, providing with the intention, I shouldn't say providing, with the intention that we will receive a presentation from the high school liaison officers to understand their mandate and their actions better? Is anybody opposed to removing this?
Mr. Chair, I have a question before I can agree to to oppose or not oppose. I had my hand up in the chat.
Okay,
Chair,
so we can go through the speakers list, and then I'll ask the question again after all trustees have spoken to it. Trustee DeRosa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would not oppose the removal of this. My experience with school resource officers has been nothing more than positive. I've heard it certainly from vice principals that I'm connected to, including, I must say, my wife, who some days would have found their job a lot more difficult to do without the support of school resource officers. So I don't want to project my personal experience on this, but I've heard nothing but very, very supportive comments from this particular role in the classrooms. So I would gladly support the removal of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So part of the reason why I think it needs to be in here is we've received a very brief kind of summary of what the resource offers. The question and the saying in this motion is that, has it fulfilled its mandate? The other question is, and maybe CETA can help answer this, but if I'm not mistaken, in other boards, this position has been removed as the program has been seen as a negative impact on Black students, any students that are racialized or Indigenous. And that was one of the reasons why the question came, was from student trustee, former student trustee Kelly, and why we had a discussion about it and why Trustee Agnew brought it forward, was to say, okay, let's take a step back and look at it. You know, we've heard wonderful things from staff about it, but what do we know from the students' standpoint, and has it fulfilled its mandate? So I guess, CETA, if you could maybe shed some light. I don't know if you know.
CETA, are you able to speak to this point?
So thank you for that, and through you, Mr. Chair. So again, I can only speak to what I have read about the experiences at other boards, namely Toronto or Hamilton School Board had recently reviewed the program. And, you know, there are many wonderful sort of benefits of the program in terms of education. But in those boards, the data collection revealed or pointed to the fact that the program actually had a negative impact on Black, racialized, and Indigenous students, that there was a disproportionate impact of surveillance on Black, Indigenous, and racialized students. And so in those boards, there was a review of who does it disproportionately impact and what does that mean. And so in those boards, there was a move to actually stop those programs. But I cannot speak to the experience in our board beyond, you know, the fact that, yes, we've had great education programs, but we also don't gather that kind of data. So again, my experience to this is from other boards in terms of what they've experienced.
Thank you. Trustee Guzzo, do you have a follow-up?
It's not so much a follow-up, but just and I appreciate the fact, CETA, that you let us know that we don't have the data, and I think that really is the point of this further resolved. I just went back to my notes, and one of the things that came from the students was that several of our racialized students did mention feeling uncomfortable or even targeted or stopped in the hallways walking to bathrooms because of this officer. And we're not asking for it to be removed, but it's a review to see, is it meeting its mandate, and to ensure that that's not happening. I think there, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was mention of it in some of our delegations too that we've received in the past from students.
Trustee Tokiwa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just had a question. Are we removing this section altogether, or will we be voting on it following the presentation if it does occur with the Halton Regional Police?
If a trustee is opposed to the consensus of having it removed, then we would vote on it. So we haven't asked that question yet.
Sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. If it does get removed, will we be just not voting on it at all, or will it be voted on following the presentation?
No, if the clause is removed from the action item, then it ceases to exist.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Trustee Agnew?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So I too went back through my notes, and I'm sorry I didn't have those earlier when the question was posed to me. I've got a lot on the go, as you can see from the agenda this evening. And yes, so that was some of the concerns as well. What Sita had mentioned is there have been benefits to the program that have been noted by many, but there also have been students that have commented on exactly what Trustee Guzzo had said, some of the interactions that they have had. And so that, for that reason, that is why that was there, is to review if the program has been working, if there has been any concerns or challenges with it, if there's anything that needs to be amended or changed with the program itself. And so having said all that and having heard what I heard, I prefer to keep this in. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there any other trustees who would like to speak to this point?
Mr. Chair.
Trustee DeRosa?
Yes,
Trustee
thank
DeRosa?
you. Thank
You
you.
have a question?
Yes, I'm concerned that we're rushing to paint the function, this function or this position or the usefulness of school resource officers in a negative light. I'm certainly, and I'd like to speak in favor of their role, the important role that they play, and these many students that they've actually helped resolve some very serious issues. So I'd like to be on record to say that you know, there might be some experiences that have been negative, but generally speaking, these resource officers actually end up helping students in trouble.
So just to be clear, this is a review. It's not removing.
No, I understand. I get it.
Okay. Okay. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Just a question through you, Mr. Chair. Trustee DeRosa just made a statement that that these officers have been very helpful to some students. I'm just wondering where he's getting that data and statistics from. If he could share it with us, that'd be fantastic.
Well, it's the same statistics.
So I think it's.
Well, I'm happy to respond, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to respond because
I understand, Trustee DeRosa, but I think you're entitled to your opinion, your experiences, and I think if we start, I don't want us to get off topic. So I think we can leave it as it is. And
I would suggest, Mr. Chair, I would suggest, I promise to be brief, but I would suggest that question that was just launched at me could be lobbed right back on the other side of the fence.
That's fine. So that,
my
again,
piece.
so okay, trustees, trustees, order, trustees, order. This is exactly why I made the statement. So we are going to stop this discussion. We are going to go to a recorded vote on this item.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Vice Chair Duarte.
This is the amended statement, the amended date.
So by consensus, it was changed. I don't know if that officially makes it amended, but it was changed by consensus. So it's as you see in front of you on December 1st. So we're going to go to a recorded vote. Trustee Bowie. Trustee Bowie had a problem with her microphone. So Trustee Bowie, we know that you are in attendance at the meeting. If you wanted to vote in the chat box, you can. We have seen you and we have heard you, so I'm comfortable that you are considered participating in the meeting. Thank you. Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa?
Opposed.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa? Trustee DeRosa?
Mr. Chair, we're just voting on the motion as it is, right?
Right, with the date of December 1st.
So we're not removing it anymore.
Right, we're voting on that paragraph.
I'm opposed to the paragraph.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I had misunderstood what we were voting on.
Okay, would you like to change your vote?
Yes, in favor.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
Absolutely in favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chernata?
In favor.
Did I get everybody? Trustee Murphy's in favor, so the motion carries. We're on to 4.3.6. So on this paragraph, there's a date of October 5th. I'm not sure if that is enough time. I don't know, Director Daly, if you can comment toward, or CETA maybe, because CETA will probably be the one doing most of the work.
I'll comment if I can.
Okay.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd request maybe the same consideration that if we could bring the report back in December.
Okay.
And I would suggest, because this is a staff report that's coming back, the date should probably coincide with a board meeting as opposed to just December 1st, just for clarity. And I would also suggest perhaps that the first board meeting in December, because that's when we select the new chair, it's probably better to keep or to have fewer things on the agenda that night if we can. So I would suggest, again, if it could be the meeting following that, but that's just a request on behalf of staff.
So the meeting following would be the 21st, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so is anybody opposed to having the date changed to the 21st? Okay, seeing that nobody's opposed, and that's what we'll do. So we'll open up the speakers list to this paragraph, which is staff continue to create and promote mental health resources. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this? If not, we can go to a recorded vote. Vice Chair Duarte.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification again. Do we know what's the goal here? Promote mental health resources. Do we have any ideas specifically in mind? Do we have any plans?
Trustee Agnew, would you like to speak to the intention of that?
Absolutely. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee Duarte. Yeah, so, we know that our mental health team has been doing an extraordinary job creating resources for all of our students, especially with what we've had transpiring in the last 18 months or so. The intention behind this is to review the current mental health resources that we have and look to see if we have some that are catered specifically to the unique experiences of some of our racialized and culturally diverse students. And if we don't have those, which I'm sure we must, if we don't, then to continue to create and promote those resources, because we know that the experiences of some of our students are going to be unique because of their ethnicity or because of their gender or because of some other factor, their background, their culture. And so for that reason, they may require mental health resources and supports that need to be a little bit different or tailored to their specific experiences. So that is the intent behind this, is to have staff provide us with what is currently available, perhaps what is being created, what is being put out there specific to these groups of students.
Vice Chair Duarte, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I always have a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So we heard from Trustee Agnew. Thank you so much. Now from staff side, do we have any staff that can talk to this, and what are the plans from staff side? Maybe Superintendent Gallo or mental health resource?
Any suggestions, Director Daly?
Well, we certainly have, and I think Trustee Agnew did speak to it, we certainly have a wealth of resources from School Mental Health Ontario that we are working through to support both teacher learning and our students. We are continuing to work on our mental health and wellness program for our secondary schools. I'd have to, if you give me a minute, Trustee Duarte, I could come
Sita
up
has her hand up. Sita, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I can get us started off, and if someone's I see that maybe Superintendent Ballo can then add to that. So this year, I've really had, actually starting last year, had the opportunity to work very closely with special education, different teams, and just recently also started talking about providing supports and programs for mental health and leadership, particularly for Black students. So we've been working with the team, with the social work team, to look at resources, create resources, and I know that there's plans to roll that out as a multi-week program to our students and parent sessions as well later in the month and beyond. I think there's, yes, I see that there's other staff from Spec Ed, and perhaps they'd like to add to that, but definitely a lot of work happening with a very intentional lens on, what are the particular needs of racialized and other students who are not always represented in mainstream curriculum. With that, I'll hand over to those.
Director Daly, did you want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to, I didn't, sorry, Jane, I didn't realize you were in the meeting. Our Chief Social Worker, Jane Atchison, is here, and I'm sure Jane could speak to our various programs in more detail than I did.
Thank you, Director Daly, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we certainly have turned our minds to supporting our students from a mental health perspective regarding racialized students and really the impacts of the pandemic that they've had on, everyone, specifically our racialized communities. As Sita had alluded to, we are creating a 6-session leadership and wellness project whereby we have 2 social workers who will be running a group at 2 high schools. We're still in the process of sorting that through the specifics of it, but these sessions have already been created, and we're really looking to those pieces around self-awareness, emotional resilience, SMART goal setting, navigating community resources for our Black students. We also collaborate with a community resource. They're called Roots. They're a very helpful organization that provides counseling and advocacy for students and families. School Mental Health Ontario also has quite a few resources which we use, and they're regarding racialized students and how to engage in conversations in the classroom with the whole class. So it helps teachers. So we will be distributing those resources as well. And as Director Daly said, our mental health literacy lessons are also going to be rolled out to the system too.
Thank you. Do we have any other trustees who would like to speak to this point? If not, we'll go to a recorded vote. I see a hand, but I don't know whose hand it is.
I think it's Jane's.
Okay, it's gone. Okay, we'll go to a recorded vote. Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew? Trustee Agnew? Come back to Trustee Agnew. Trustee DeRosa?
In favor.
Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Ternata?
In favor?
Trustee Bowie, we'll give you a moment to type into the chat box. In the meantime, oh, in favor, you typed fast. Trustee Agnew?
Mike is not working.
Okay, Trustee Agnew won't vote. Sorry, Trustee Murphy's in favor. Trustee Agnew's vote won't impact the outcome, so the motion carries. Item 4.3.7, which is the last paragraph. Is there anybody who would like to speak to that?
Mr. Chair, sorry, Trustee Agnew is having mic issues and she's asked me to speak to this.
Okay, please go ahead.
So again, the effectiveness, equity, and outcomes of the overall practice of streaming be reviewed as part of the race-based student data collection in both the pilot and final board-wide data collection. I think that this is partially already covered in the motion that was just passed prior to this motion being on the table. I think that it just follows in line with the motion that we've just previously passed. It just makes sense that we look at the outcomes and overall practices once we do collect that data.
Thank you. Vice Chair Duarte, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, I'm assuming that the streaming we're talking about is for AP Math, is for the math curriculum grade 9 only. So I'm just wondering what could be the outcome here of this part. Say we take this, we do the race-based data collection, and what impact are they going to have? How are we going to use that data? Can we change the streaming practice or the streaming that we are talking about? We cannot, because it's mandated by the ministry. So how can we use this particular motion to improve what we are delivering to our students? Maybe we should ask Director Daly if he can clarify, or Superintendent Cordero.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can try. It's not my motion, but I can try. I think the intent of it is not to look at de-streamed math. In fact, it's to look at our other streamed courses. So in grade 9, our required courses other than math are streamed. So students in English and science, geography are streamed into academic and applied and sometimes locally developed courses. I'm assuming the intent, I'm not sure the way the motion reads if we can determine effectiveness of streaming. We could certainly determine once we have student demographic data, if, for example, certain groups of students are disproportionately streamed or in a particular course. There's a number of things we can probably pull out of it. So I think that's what the intent is of the motion, I would guess to take a look at whether our data is similar to the provincial data that was pulled to de-stream math and see whether or not some of those negative impacts that the data showed for students in math are also there in some of our other compulsory courses.
Vice Chair Duarte, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So if our data shows something other than what the provincial guidelines are we able to change what is mandated by the ministry as far as the curriculum is concerned?
Director Daly?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The ministry mandates the curriculum that we do teach. Certainly, if we wanted to offer something different with regards to curriculum delivery, that would be something we would do in concert with the ministry. So, for example, There's some boards that have de-streamed all of their grade 9 courses already. They didn't wait for, if in fact that's the plan for the ministry down the road. There's other boards, and I think we did it at one time where we decided to offer grade 9 math and science for the whole year. So rather than having it by semester, we had some schools pilot that. So based on what our data can tell us, then I think really the idea behind gathering that data is to help inform our next steps in a better way.
Thank you, Director Daly. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Yes, I want to ask, and I don't know if this is considered a friendly amendment or not, because I know the motion's already been passed, but we've already done the pilot. I'm wondering if we should remove that piece, the pilot, and just the board-wide data collection.
Does anybody have any opposition to removing that pilot in both the pilot, and it would be just the final board-wide data collection?
I would, Mr. Chair. I think all of the data is needed. I think this is a really important part of the motion. This is going to give us the information we need, and I think the pilot will give us whether or not there's a relationship between streaming and systemic racism. So I'd like to keep the pilot in. Thank you.
Okay, so we will vote on it as is. Director Daly?
Okay, sorry, then I would like to actually make an amendment then. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I still have the floor.
Okay, what's your amendment?
My amendment is to strike out in both the pilot and just put data collection in the final board-wide data collection. We've already done the pilot board-wide data collection.
Okay.
We're moving on to the final in the spring.
Okay, so let's vote on we're voting on this the strikeout only. We're not voting on the entire paragraph. We're only voting to strike out in both the pilot and the. If you need a discussion, we can have discussion. Yes, Vice Chair Dewar.
Mr. Chair, this is a clarification.
Oh, sorry, we need a seconder first of all.
Trustee Agnew?
Seconded by, I better make this note, otherwise I'll forget. So moved by Trustee Guzzo, seconded by Trustee Agnew. Sorry, go ahead, Vice Chair Dewar.
Just a question here again. The pilot program, review of this data collection, when has it been done? Director Daly, can you just, other than which subjects has it been done? Great.
Thank you, and through Mr. Chair. So the pilot was conducted last spring. It was done at 6 schools total. It was a very small number of students. I think it was a little over 220 total, and probably less than 20 at the secondary level. The idea behind the pilot was really not to necessarily collect the data, but to test the census instrument and to get feedback on the way the questions were asked. So, the pilot has been conducted, and I think based on the number of responses, we wouldn't be able to glean much from the data around streaming.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dewar. Do you have a follow-up?
No.
Would anybody else like to speak to the amendment only, which is the strikeout of the words in red on the screen in front of you? If not, we can go to a recorded vote. Seeing that there's none, we'll go to a recorded vote. Trustee Tokiwa?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
Opposed.
Vice Chair Dewar?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo? Trustee Guzzo? We can come back to Trustee Guzzo. Trustee O'Brien?
Opposed.
Trustee O'Hearn-Turnado?
I'm in favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo voted in favor. Trustee Murphy's in favor. So the amendment, motion to amend passes. So we're on to the paragraph as amended. I don't see anybody else on the speakers list. I'll call one more time if there's anybody who would like to speak to this paragraph as it is in front of you. If not, we'll go to a recorded vote. Okay, we'll go to a recorded vote. Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
Opposed.
Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo? Trustee Guzzo, you're deemed to be in attendance at the meeting, so you would be able to vote in the chat box, just as Trustee Bowie has been able to. Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Ternata?
I'm in favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa?
In favor.
And Trustee Murphy is in favor, so the motion carries, and we have completed item 4.3. Moving on to item 4.4, elementary community classroom. This motion is a notice of motion from August 17th, 2021, special board meeting. Trustee Agnew, would you please read the motion?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Okay. Whereas there is continued demand to meet the needs of some of our special education learners who have complex needs, and whereas the Halton Catholic District School Board currently only has one community classroom for elementary students, and whereas the capacity limits for the classroom are low and turnover is low, thereby limiting access to the classroom, and whereas the community classroom is currently housed in Oakville, be it resolved that the Director of Education directs staff to bring a report to the Board of Trustees for the first regular board meeting in October, outlining how this program can be expanded to include more sites and more students.
Can we get a seconder? Vice Chair Duarte. So before we open up debate, do we need to look at the date? Is that date good? I guess, well, this came from August, so it wasn't that long ago. Just a clarification, is the date sufficient?
I would defer to staff if there's a little more time again. If we need to add a few more weeks to make up for the delay in bringing this to the table, I would be okay with that.
Director Daly?
Yeah, I'm just hoping for a response from staff because it won't be me doing the report. Superintendent Ballo has her hand up.
Okay, Superintendent Ballo, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee Agnew. I think that if we could take a little bit more time, we would be prepared for October, for the subsequent October meeting, perhaps the 19th of October even.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any opposition to adding the date of October 19th? And if not, then we can, I'm mixing everybody's titles up. Trustee Agnew, you could open debate.
Okay, just give me a moment here. I'm just going to pull up my notes. And I hope I'm not opening debate. I hope I'm just opening conversation.
Well, at least I didn't call you Trustee Guzzo. It
would be an honor. So I've obviously read the motion out. So just to give a little bit more background, and I did send my explanatory notes out to my fellow trustees, but there is currently one special education classroom that serves elementary students identified as multiple and/or intellectual developmental disability. The community living class is for students with mixed exceptionalities. This class rarely exceeds 6 students. The admission criteria for this class is heavily weighted in favor of students who are medically fragile, are not ambulatory, and require support for feeding and toileting, and in some cases, nursing care. Community living classes are for students from kindergarten to grade 8, and the class is currently located in Oakville. For those trustees who may not be aware, there are 5 placement options available to kids with multiple exceptionalities. And so just quickly to give you an idea of what those placements would be, one would be a regular class placement with resource assistance, one would be a regular class with withdrawal assistance, one would be a special education class with partial integration, one would be a special education class full-time. I'm missing one there. Maybe there's just the 4, sorry. So these options, these range of placement options are available for these students with this identification. The challenge becomes is that the rationale for this motion is that even though these placements are available to these students, unfortunately, with only having one community classroom available, it does limit the opportunity for parents to select that option for their students to attend. And also when they're going through the IPRC process, I'm just wondering if we're actually providing an equal opportunity for students to attend all placements that would be available for that identification. And so that would be the reason behind wanting to take a look at expanding that community classroom so that we could provide additional opportunities for students who may be requiring that placement. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Agnew. On the speakers list, we have Trustee Guzzo and Vice Chair Duarte. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Thank you. I rebooted my computer, so thank you for your patience with me, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Trustee Agnew for bringing this forward. I have had the pleasure of visiting our school in Oakville that offers this program, and the staff and the dedication to this program there are amazing. It really is just so unfortunate that we don't have more placement options. You know, when we look at what this program offers and who it serves, I think, you know, getting some more information on feasibility, on being able to accommodate more is a step in the right direction. You know, I too have had questions about this, and unfortunately, fortunately, we have the expertise that we do, and I appreciate the fact that Trustee Agnew has brought this forward so that that we can have a more conversation about this, because the last thing I think we would ever want to do is not offer this to some of our most vulnerable students in our board. So thank you so much for taking this. I will be supporting this 100%.
Vice Chair Duarte, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I don't think it's equitable and fair to have one of these classrooms in Oakville that like something better. But the thing is, I want to know the utilization. How many students are from each municipality? Milton, Halton Hills, Burlington, and Oakville. Can someone see the numbers?
Superintendent Ballo, would you happen to have those numbers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to Trustee Duarte, I can say that with there only being 6 students in the class, I am mindful about giving too much information because I certainly don't want to provide any identifying information with there only being 6. But I can confirm that we do have students who are coming from Milton and from Burlington area.
Vice Chair Duarte, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I always have one. So the question again to Superintendent Ballo, is the facility enough to sustain the demand we have across the entire region?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yep. So at this time, we do have the one class, as Trustee Agnew has mentioned. The class is full. We do have a capacity limit of 6, and that's part of the regulation in the Education Act that we can't exceed that number. So do we have a wait list at this time? We do not, but the class is full at 6 students. So if we do get other students who meet the criteria and the parents are interested, then we would not have the space for the student to join the class at this time. We continually keep an eye on the class and we monitor, and we see what the needs are in the system. And that's where we are at this time. So the class is full with the 6 students.
Thank you.
Trustee Ahern-Ternado, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I guess Director Daly or Superintendent Ballo. So I guess I need a little history lesson. One, how long has the elementary community classroom existed in Halton Catholic? And if anyone can tell me, why was the decision made back then to place it in Oakville?
Director Daly, would you like that, or Superintendent Ballo?
Although I'm older than Superintendent Ballo, I think she could probably give a better history of the program than I can.
Superintendent Ballo, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, and I'll take it, Mr. Daly. I can say that the program has been, for as long as I've been around, which is quite a while, in Oakville. Prior to the St. Teresa location, it was at St. James School, and then when St. James closed a few years ago, the program did get moved to St. Teresa. I am not aware of the program being in any other area. And part of the work that we've already started is to try to gather some of that historical information.
Trustee Ahern-Ternado, do you have a follow-up question?
Just a clarifying question, if I may, Superintendent Ballo. So the classroom has been around for years, from what I'm understanding. So I would like to support the report coming back, because probably, you know, different areas have different growth and different wants and needs in different areas. So thank you for that information, and I will support this absolutely.
Thank you. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just a question maybe to Superintendent Ballo, if I may. You see that there isn't a wait list, so I guess, do we actually have like a physical wait list if a parent calls and says, I'm interested in this program? How would they be handled? Would they be placed on a wait list? Because it's not as if these students, that their abilities are going to change, because we really are talking about students who have complex needs, right? And so it's not something that if there isn't a position for them, that they can just say, okay, add me to the wait list, and not look for other avenues to ensure that their child's needs are being met. So can you maybe just walk me through what happens if a parent calls? Are they told that there is a wait list?
Sure, and through you, Mr. Chair. So as a spec ed team, our consultants work really closely with our schools and know our students in our schools. And typically, as I said, we work in collaboration with the parent. So the parent may make the request. Sometimes the school will make the recommendation to the parent to consider the classroom placement. It's not, even though the class is a wonderful class, and I appreciate the acknowledgement that you provided earlier, it's not necessarily a placement that every parent selects for their child. So parents are very much at different points in their journey, and parents, do need to make those decisions for themselves if they want their child, to leave their home school, which we've talked about before with our inclusion model. We are able to support students in a typical class, so it's not for every family. And that's what I could say about, the parent's decision and the parent's role. And this year, because we do monitor that class, we did have a student who was new to us, who was interested in the class. And just because of some movement that took place over the summer, there was some space that was open for that parent who was interested in the class. So now it's full again at 6 students. And if we did
sorry, I was just going to, housekeeping item, we have to extend, but sorry, Superintendent Ballo, if you're not finished, please go ahead.
No, it's okay, thank you.
Okay, so a little housekeeping, we have to vote to extend past 10 o'clock. Trustee DeRosa, how do you vote? Trustee DeRosa? We'll come back to Trustee DeRosa. Vice Chair Duarte? In favor. Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Ahern-Ternado?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa? Come back to trustee Tokiwa. Trustee Agnew?
In favor?
Trustee DeRosa? Come back. Let's see. Well, we need 5, so we have the enough 2/3 to continue. So Trustee DeRosa's vote will not, and Trustee Tokiwa's vote will not impact the result. So we are extended to 10:30. Trustee Guzzo, did you have a follow-up question?
I do, and maybe this is just a better way of putting it. So Superintendent Ballo, if we had a student tomorrow asked to be put in that class, could we accommodate it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we could not accommodate that student because we cannot exceed the 6 students. So they would be supported at their home school, and the special education staff would work with the school to support that student.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Agnew, you have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I had a similar question. I was going to tie into the IPRC, but Stephanie, Superintendent Ballo has answered that question. Thank you.
We don't have any other questions. We can move to a.
Mr. Chair, I have one question for Ms. Ballo, please.
Okay, please go ahead.
Superintendent Ballo, I'm just trying to get a picture of this classroom, and I really am very on to this motion. So would these students be have more medical needs or more needs than a student in a life skills class? I'm just trying to get a picture of what this classroom looks like.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee O'Brien, the students in the class who are part of the community living classroom are typically students who require support with fine and gross motor ability, mobility, communication, daily living, self-care, and in some cases, they also require nursing care in the classroom. And these students, when they go to secondary school, would be students who would go into a life skills classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, do you have a follow-up?
No, it's just, well, one question. There seems to be a lot of life skills. Every community has a life skill, every school has a life skills class that I know of in high school. And I'm sure they draw from just more than these 6 children. So I'm just trying to get a picture of how this works. So would a life skills class then take on other children as well in a high school?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can answer that question. So every secondary school does have a life skills class, whereas not every elementary school offers self-contained placements. So we have certain schools across the system that offer different self-contained classes. So the 6 students who are in the CLC, they would then go to their secondary school that's in their catchment area when they go to grade 9, typically. And otherwise, there are other students that join that class in grade 9, and those would be students whose parents have chosen to leave their child in their home school and to not be part of that class.
So there are no life skills classes in elementary schools?
No, there are not. That's a secondary placement.
All right, thank you. That makes it clear.
Thank you. So if we.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Trustee DeRosa, yeah.
I'm sorry, but my microphone was disabled for some reason. So I logged out and logged back in. So for the record, Mr. Chair, I would have voted to extend.
Okay.
Okay. So the technology seems to be cooperating so far. So let's proceed. Thank you.
Okay. I actually am knocked out, but I'm looking at the main screen now. So we can go to a recorded vote. There might be a bit of a lag before I react to the chat, but we will go to a recorded vote on this motion 4.4. Trustee Agnew, how do you vote?
In favor, Mr. Chair.
Trustee DeRosa?
In favor.
Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
Definitely in favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chernata?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa, who will probably vote on in the chat box. In favor. Motion carries. We are on to item 4.5. Senior staff updates. The following is a notice of motion from August 17th, 2021 special board meeting. Trustee Agnew, would you please read the motion?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair. I feel like I feel like we're having like a big conversation tonight. So it's you and me. Okay, whereas there are numerous happenings in and around Halton Catholic District School Board, ACDSB, across the region, including school-based initiatives, student success, sporting and extracurricular events, social justice programs, parish-led initiatives, special education programs, staff excellence, and much more. And whereas there was not always a consistent opportunity to present information on these various happenings to the Board of Trustees, parents, students, staff, and other stakeholders, be it resolved that each superintendent and the Director of Education prepare and present a monthly report at the last regularly scheduled board meeting of each month, effective September the 21st, 2021.
Can we have a seconder for this motion? Vice Chair Duarte. Trustee Agnew, please open up discussion.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, recognizing that we may have to adjust that date. It seems like it's next week, so I don't know that that's going to work. But essentially, this is just a feel-good motion. It is not meant to try to create any extra additional work for superintendents, although I know asking for you to prepare a monthly report may seem that way, but this comes from a place of good intention. There's been examples of, let's say, the SEAC table, and CPIC does it, where we have reports from superintendents. It's such an excellent way to highlight and share some of the great happenings across our system that we don't always get to hear. Parents don't get to hear. We're just not always able to share those. We often hear about staff who have been involved with amazing initiatives or have received awards or who have presented, or just different things that are happening across our system. And I know that there are other boards across Ontario that do something like this. And so it would be wonderful to have those updates from the superintendents of our family of schools or of curriculum, and from our Director of Education on things that are happening that they would like to share with the Board of Trustees and all of the stakeholders. So that is truly the intention behind this motion, and I hope that everybody can support it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So by consensus, do we want to change the date to October 5th or October 19th? Director Daly, is October 5th too soon, or October 5th is good?
I do have a few questions about the report, but
okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we have, is anybody opposed to changing the date to October 5th? Okay, so we'll make that change, and the floor is open to Trustee O'Hearn-Chernata.
Mr. Chair, can you put me in the lineup, please?
Yes, no problem at all. Trustee O'Hearn-Chernata? We'll come back. We'll go to Trustee DeRosa, and then we'll come back to Trustee O'Hearn. Trustee DeRosa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a very simple question. How is this different than the weekly report that the director gives us now?
May I answer, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Trustee Agnew, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you to Trustee DeRosa. Well, I think it varies in a number of different ways. The first one would be that it is the weekly report we get from the Director of Education just comes to the trustees, and it just comes from the Director of Education. And I completely appreciate those reports, and I'm glad that the Director does those. But if you look at this, what I'm requesting or what I'm looking for is additional information from each of our superintendents, that can speak to their area of expertise, that could speak to the specific happenings of their area, and perhaps there are updates that Director Daly would like to share that may not necessarily be something that he feels have to go into a specific operational update or a fiscal update or a ministry update to the Board of Trustees in his weekly update. This is something that could talk about, like I said, a number of these other happenings that are going on across our board, and those are not something that we would see in that weekly update. And again, the bigger point of that is that the stakeholders out there do not see that weekly update. It's very specific to trustees, and I think this is an opportunity for us to present these great happenings across our system at the board meetings for everybody to hear about. Thank you.
Trustee DeRosa, do you have a follow-up?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay. Trustee Ernst-Nata, I see your green dot, so I think you're back with us.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize. My computer had a mind of its own there. I was clicking and nothing was happening. So just through you, Mr. Chair, Trustee Agnew. So I agree with the intent of this. So I have two concerns. One would be if we're going to have a presentation, we should have a time limit, you know, maybe a 3-minute presentation or 2-minute. And I also offer up for suggestion, maybe amendment and have it in the board package as opposed to presenting to us at the last board meeting of the month. So two things, a time limit on the actual presentation or attaching it as correspondence to our meeting.
Trustee Agnew?
Yes, thank you very much through you, Mr. Chair. So I absolutely agree. I don't want this to be laborious. So for sure, you know, time limit would be completely appreciated. And I don't mind the suggestion of having it go in as part of the board package, but the really nice idea, if someone hasn't seen it happen, again, I'm going to use CX as an example, or if you look at our coterminous board, you know, when Superintendent Ballo, as an example, is able to provide her superintendent's update at SEAC, it's a great opportunity, again, for us to ask some questions or to get some more clarification or to, you know, just applaud what's happening. And I feel like that would be lost in if it was just attached as a report, if you will. I feel like it loses the essence of what what I'm hoping this would do. That would be my thought on that. I understand totally where you're coming from, though, but I think it would be great if it would be an actual spoken update on things that they want to share with us that they think would be of interest.
Trustee O'Hearn-Chernobyl, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Just one other thing popped in my head as Trustee Agnew was speaking. What about if one superintendent presented per month? So instead of hearing from all the superintendents, one superintendent per month.
Trustee Agnew?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a glutton for information. So, you know, if we felt that one superintendent a month would be sufficient, I mean, there might be a lot for them to report when we get around to it. Another alternative would be perhaps not a monthly report, but perhaps possibly a quarterly report where all superintendents may present quarterly. That could be something else for consideration. I just don't know how much they would have happening that if they were only if we were going through the rotation, we may not get to hear from another superintendent more than once, perhaps, you know, maybe twice. And I just don't know what would be going on. That would be my only thought to that if we were to do that rotation.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dewar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do so many great things in our system, and I have always been a very strong proponent of bringing the good things as a presentation to our board meetings. So I'm just wondering here if rather than a report, could it be a presentation once a month and highlight all the good things that we do? Because if we do not highlight the good things that we do, only the errors that we make get highlighted. So I'm just wondering from Trustee Agnew can respond if a presentation once a month highlighting the great things that we do in our system be brought to the board. Mr. Chair?
Trustee Agnew, did you want to comment?
Sure, I can do that. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know, listen, this motion was put forward, like I said, with the intent that I had behind it, and so that's how it sort of came to be. But I'd be amiable to, if there's another way to do this, if a presentation would be more effective, if all the superintendents wanted to get together and do you know, one update or one presentation together per month, or whatever that might be. So Trustee Dort, I really am open to it. And to your point, I've always said that a lot of the times we focus so much on the negative, and that's okay. It's okay when things happen, because then we have an opportunity to learn from that and to make changes to make things better. But we don't often celebrate or talk enough about some of the wonderful things that we have going on and the great things. And I think those need to be communicated and celebrated as well. And that's ideally what, you know, I'm trying to accomplish here. So the mechanism for doing that, I really am open. This is just what I have seen done in other boards that I thought would be helpful to bring forward to ours.
Vice Chair Duart, you have your second question in your chamber.
No follow-up this time.
Well, false advertising. Yeah, I think if I can make a comment, I think it's a great idea. You know, basically we're celebrating our wins, and we could pick 3 wins a month, and the 3 wins a month could be 2 or 3 sentences on each win. So I don't think it has to be overly laborious or overly structured. As I think the spirit of what we're saying is, you know, Director Daly, can you bring us a couple of wins a month, more or less, right? Director Daly?
Yeah, I guess I did have a couple of questions just in terms of process. I'm certain that trustees probably don't want to hear any more from me every month. So I'd be happy to have our superintendent speak of their good work, but happy to kind of do it either way. I guess my question would be, you know, when we say a presentation, like there's a difference between a presentation and an information report. So if it's a presentation that is in the presentation part of the agenda, that's one thing I'd want to know about, so we could give some further direction to staff. It may be problematic to have 10 superintendents all present for their portfolios each month. It might make, I don't want to say make more sense, it might be helpful to do 3 or 4 as maybe the chair discussed, or 4 or 5. You know, one of my, I don't want to say concerns, but if it's an information item that falls to kind of the end of the information items, to be quite blunt, we oftentimes don't get there in our board meetings. So I think it would be asking staff to share good stories that we don't actually get to share. So I think we'd be happy to do it presentation style, if that's for lack of a better term, but where trustees see it best fit on the agenda, we certainly take that direction. I guess those are just a couple of comments.
And I think we maybe utilize the skills of our communications department, and really if they quarterback our wins, I think that might be a way to do it also. Trustee Guzzo, you have the floor.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just gonna put it out there because I know there's a whole bunch of ideas being floated on how to handle this, but you know, I know that there's senior leadership meetings, and I'm not sure if they happen weekly or whatnot, but that could be somewhere where it's decided on what would be a good thing to be highlighted at the board. Just a thought. I don't think it's necessarily recreating the wheel. I think it's just passing that information and making sure that we talk about the wins.
Okay, so do we want to keep the motion as it is, or is there any modifications?
That was a question. Sorry, there was part of a question there, Mr. Chair, to Director Daly, which is their leadership meetings. I'm not sure, is it weekly or bi-weekly that they have their senior leadership?
Yeah, there's certainly no, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, there's certainly no shortage of things that we can share both with the public and with trustees at public board meetings. That's really not the issue. I guess my question is really more around, is it a presentation in the presentation slot in the agenda? Is it an information report in information reports? I think I'd ask for some direction there so that we can prepare appropriately.
Trustee Guzzo, do you have a follow-up?
I like the idea of a presentation. I don't know if Trustee Agnew would be, if that's was her intent on this.
So if we have a consensus, we can change it to prepare a presentation, a monthly presentation on our wins. Okay. So we would change present a monthly report to a monthly presentation. Is there anybody who's opposed to that? A monthly presentation on successes? Let me know if I'm taking over your motion, Trustee Agnew.
Mr. Chair.
No, you're not, Mr. Chair. And I think that would be fine. I mean, yeah, and it can be wins, it can be whatever staff, wants to talk about. I just think good stories, happenings, things that we just may not be aware of is, I think, the whole intent behind this. Not everybody's on Twitter. We don't always get to see the great things that our staff is out there doing. And I think that's what we'd like to see.
So Trustee DeRosa, you have the floor.
Just a passing comment before we move on this thing. I frankly am satisfied with the director's report, and to leave it up to the director to highlight the successes and the contents of that report. I'm concerned about making adding additional burden and adding additional time to our board meetings. So Director Daly is accountable for his staff for all the good things that they do. I think the board relies on Director Daly to report on those good things, not only the bad things. And his weekly report, frankly, has been well appreciated up to now. Maybe an approach to what we're talking about is maybe expanding that report to some degree. So those are my observations on this.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Duarte, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really like the format of the presentation because I really don't recollect getting to the information items in a long time. So presentation really helpful.
Okay, so we've made a change to the motion. So a monthly presentation. Do we have to put the subject of the presentation, or is it's a given that we're talking about a staff update? I guess the intention's clear. Okay. So we can go to a recorded, Director Daly.
Sorry, just if it's at the last regularly scheduled board meeting of each month, I don't think October 5th is the correct date. I think it would be October, whatever the second meeting is in October.
19th.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll change that to the 19th. Trustee O'Hearn-Chernato, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, through Mr. Chair. It's me again. I'm just wondering if I can bring it to my colleagues. Do we have to have every superintendent at the end of each month with a presentation? I'm just concerned that the presentations, we're going to be so excited with all the successes. We're going to talk about it a lot. So I'm hoping we can go 3 superintendents like Director Daly or some sort of a split. I love the idea, but I think at the same time, we need to be realistic.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think the intention was to bring 3 or so wins, depending on what's going on. But we can speak to that. Trustee Agnew, so the intent, would your expectation be during this monthly presentation of our successes that every superintendent and the director would talk, or the director, the senior leadership group would pick 3 or so relevant successes?
So I think, okay, I'm just going to put this out. So I love information. I love hearing what we're doing. I love sharing it. I think it's really important, and I don't think that we share enough. And I think that has been highlighted this evening, but I want to be respectful of people's time. And so, I don't want to dictate this process. I feel like I'm having to dictate this too much. Again, the intent behind this was, let's hear some, as the first whereas, let's hear some great things that are happening in some of these different areas. I would prefer to not have us limit it to 3 wins and then those be specifically chosen special wins. And if we have to minimize the time spent on this because we're cognizant of spending too much time on it, or as Trustee O'Hearn-Zernata says, we are going to get excited. I am fine leaving it to the discretion of senior leadership to have the conversation, to decide what you would like to present, and perhaps it becomes a combined superintendent's report that is presented, that has a few wins or a few different things from a couple of different areas. This is an opportunity to share good stories, success stories, to highlight the things we do in the board, to talk about things that are not always based on budgets or fiscal or other things. This is an opportunity for us to talk about sports teams who are winning, or things that are happening, or dances that are going on, or great initiatives with robotics or whatever that is. And we don't have a chance to do that. And I'd like to do that. I think our parents would like to hear that. And I think it offers a great opportunity. How that is done, I don't want to browbeat. So if senior leadership wants to come up with a different way of doing that, and my fellow trustees have a different idea, I'm welcome to hear that. But I don't want to minimize the impact of this and have it reduced to such a point that it's 3 good points quarterly, because then we may as well not do it, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have to vote to extend. Vice Chair Duarte, how do you vote?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo? Trustee Guzzo, you can come back to Trustee Guzzo.
In favor.
Oh, in favor, thank you. Trustee O'Brien? Trustee O'Brien? Come back to Trustee O'Brien. Trustee O'Hearn-Zernata?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
Abstain.
Trustee Masri Amar?
Abstained.
Trustee Tokiwa? Abstain. Okay, Trustee O'Brien voted in favor. Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
It's the last item. We're going to have to finish it, so I vote in favor.
Okay, Trustee Murphy's in favor, so we're extended to 11 o'clock. Trustee Agnew, I believe the director has the intent and understanding, and I think as written is fine. Is that correct, Director? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly if it's if what we come up with isn't sufficient, we're open to, or yeah, we're certainly open to more suggestions. But I completely agree that there's so many good things going on the board. We will have no shortage of things to report on.
Excellent. Vice Chair Duarte, you had your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think this is a point here. Presentation could be up to 20 minutes. So that could be eating the board time. So do we want to say monthly presentation maximum 10 minutes? Again, up to my fellow trustees out here. You want to say monthly presentation up to 10 minutes or so, or just leave it at
that? I think the director has a good understanding of the intent, and it's meant to be not meant to be onerous. So I think at this stage we can vote on it, and then we can always modify it as we need to. Trustee O'Hearn-Zernata?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I disagree. No offense to Director Daly, but I think we need to put a combined total minute limit on it, 15 minutes for all total presentations. So I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay.
Friendly amendment that each superintendent and the director of education prepare a monthly presentation at the last regularly scheduled board meeting of each month to be no longer than 15 minutes.
Okay.
Not each, but as a group.
Okay. Is there any opposition to that change? If there isn't, we'll vote on it as is. And if there is, we'd have to go to a vote on the amendment. So there's no opposition, so that would be regarded as a friendly amendment. So I think we can close debate on this item and go to a recorded vote. Trustee Agnew?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm unclear. Are we voting on the amendment? We're not voting on it?
No, there was no opposition to it, so it was adopted as a friendly amendment.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I like the original wording.
Okay, so we'll vote on the amendment. So to be clear, we're only voting on what's highlighted in yellow. Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Okay, Trustee DeRosa?
I'm in favor of the amendment.
Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
Opposed.
Trustee O'Hearn-Trinata?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa? In favor. Trustee Murphy's in favor. So we now are going to recorded vote on the motion as amended. So it's as presented in front of you. Trustee DeRosa?
I'm opposed.
Vice Chair Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo? Trustee Guzzo? We can come back to Trustee Guzzo. Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee O'Hearn-Trinata?
In favor.
Trustee Bowie?
In favor.
Trustee Masri Amar?
In favor.
Trustee Tokiwa? In favor. Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I couldn't unlock again. I'm in favor.
Okay, perfect. And Trustee Murphy's in favor. The motion carries. We're moving on to item 5, resolution for absentees. May I have a motion to excuse Trustee Antomasi and Trustee Carabella?
And
Moved by Vice Chair Duarte, seconded by
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Trustee DeRosa. Are any opposed?
I'm opposed, Mr. Chair.
I'm opposed, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Agnew, Trustee Guzzo. So the motion carries. Trustee DeRosa, will you lead us in the closing prayer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please join me in the sign of our faith. Let me put my camera on. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for your participation in this special meeting. We appreciate it, and we'll see you in a few days at our regular board meeting.
Good night.